Welcome to the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. I am David Lindsay, co-founder, lead educator, and speaker at Phantom Leap Education. At Phantom Leap Education, we believe people have so much more inside of them than they realize. And through our services, we help them become the best versions of themselves possible. Beyond the individual, we also believe that company culture is such a large part in creating a business that not only survives, but will thrive through the tough times, as we've all been through the last few years. So over the next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll be shining a spotlight on businesses that have achieved this and how you may be able to incorporate some of their ideas and philosophies into your business. Stick around until the end and I'll reveal how you can become a guest on a future podcast. Now is the time to sit back, take down some notes and enjoy this episode of the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. And welcome to this week's episode of the Dynamic Company Culture podcast. In today's episode, we have Anthony Harcher. Anthony's a clinical nutritionist, a mental health professional, and founder of Me My Wellness. Anthony, welcome to the podcast. And would you like to tell the listeners about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, David, for having me on the show. And I look forward to sharing my wisdom and knowledge on the subject of mental health and corporate culture. So thanks. Yeah, thanks again for having me on. Really appreciate it. In terms of about me, it can be a long story or a short story. So I'll give you the short story and not the long one. So essentially, I started out in corporate as a chemical engineer. So I've spent 15 years. I spent 15 years in corporate. So I was climbing the corporate ladder, and initially I enjoyed the challenge of solving customers' problems. But then as you get better at doing that, you get elevated within the company. And that's where things didn't resonate with me. It got more internal politics. And for me, I just wanted to help people solve problems. And so essentially in that journey, I thought, well, what is it that I really want to help people solve problems with? And I had this thing that was always inside me, a passion for health and well-being ever since I was a kid. I was reading books, and I remember reading Wayne Pearce's book on health. So that's how old I am.
And that's a good guide to follow as well when it comes to health.
Absolutely. And then I remember jumping onto Arnold Schwarzenegger's book, and he's so I got into the gym and eating well and looking after myself. I love my sports. And anyway, I ended up following this career in a more traditional path, such as university and then chemical. And so once I reignited with my passion of health, I decided, okay, I need to develop some credibility in this space. As much as I've got a passion for it and I love learning about it and I've been teaching myself, I thought, okay, I'll go and get some formal qualifications. And I did that. So I ended up with another degree in health science, majoring in nutrition and dietetic medicine, and a degree in complementary medicine. So hence where I am today, where I love what I do and I love serving others and helping them solve their health problems.
Yeah, and it makes such a world of difference when you love doing what you do. Like you said, climbing up the corporate ladder and then the internal politics is just enough to drag a lot of people down. And that sort of leads me into what this podcast is about. It's really about company culture and celebrating the brilliant company cultures that are around. So no doubt seeing it from the inside out, seeing it in a negative way. How would you say that affects people that you're working with at the moment, whether it's a negative company culture or a positive company culture?
Yeah, absolutely. So a negative one, well, we've actually seen what the negative effect has had on companies in terms of employees resigning and walking out the door. So as people on this podcast have heard about the Great Resignation, we had the Great Pause, and then that led to the Great Resignation. So the COVID pandemic certainly allowed people to reflect on what they were doing and also what they would like to do, and so people were, I guess, given a tap on the shoulder by COVID to say, maybe look at something that you really want to do and get away from what you don't like. And I've read papers where, like, I think it's statistics essentially that 60% of employees leave because of their manager. and it's probably changed a little bit. It's probably gone up. It's probably gone up a little bit more,
I
but
reckon go up for sure.
yeah. So so it's certainly seen that side of people leaving because of the disconnection they've had with their company, and that was probably ongoing. But in terms of great company cultures, you certainly see people just love what they're doing within that company, and they get recognized. And I think one of the big things I've noticed with these companies that do that really well is the voice of the employee is heard. There's opportunities for the employee to speak out, and they're listened to. So like some of these companies have these ability for employees to speak out, but it's not acted upon, and so it means nothing. But the companies that do really well is where they're listening to the voice of the employee as well as the customer. Obviously, the customer's got to be heard as well, but it's important that the employees also listen to.
Yeah, I could imagine that would be so frustrating. Just because, like you said, if your voice isn't heard, well, then what's the point in saying it? It becomes you're just another notch in the belt, so to speak, as opposed to the companies that allow you to have that voice, and not just have a voice, but to be listened to. And it's not always going to be acted upon, but for it to be, partially worked in to the running of the business.
Absolutely. And I think the Generation Z are big believers in they have belief in themselves, and they want to make a difference, and they want to be heard. And I think the millennials are sort of the ones that were cutting the pathway for the Gen Z to come in. But so it's really important. And I agree with you. Not every time that the company can act upon it, but it's certainly got to show that it's heard the employee's voice.
Yeah, 100%. And especially, like you said, with the great resignation that has been going on, and whether that's slowing down or whether it's just going to pick up again the way everything's going. But the last 2 years in particular have been a crazy time for everybody involved. How has your business really zigged while others have zagged? And how has it affected you, your business, and all that goes on with that?
It's had a massive effect. And initially it was sort of a bit daunting because there was no customers, right? Essentially, I was thinking, what do I do with myself now? But as you said, I certainly zigged, and I started podcasting. I thought, well, my mission, when I set up Me and My Wellness, was to enhance and enlighten the well-being of others. And I was doing that through face-to-face consulting, essentially. And then I thought, okay, I can get onto, grab a microphone and get onto podcasting, and then still be able to educate and empower others through another medium. And then I did webinars at the same time as I was podcasting. So it got me to many, so to speak. I was able to leverage my time better because of it. And the other thing that it really transformed was the way we do healthcare. So always you'd be, booking appointments, traveling to that appointment, waiting in the waiting list, and getting, in the waiting queue, I meant to say, getting frustrated with, I just want to go and see the doctor or see the specialist. But now you essentially can book, telehealth appointments, and that's how it's really changed my business. My business, I was geographically bound, essentially. So being in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, only eastern suburbs people in Sydney would come and see me. But now I'm supporting people in Queensland, in Victoria, overseas, in the USA. It's really opened up the opportunities for me. So there's been so many pros to what's happened, and obviously, there has been the drawbacks. But yeah, I've certainly benefited. I think the healthcare industry's benefited. We've got better technology as a result of it, and it pushed me out of my comfort zone. I was getting quite comfortable.
And that's where as we all know, that's where the real growth happens, is outside of the comfort zone. Like you said, you're comfortable. I've been to your offices at Westfield. Is that where you're still at Westfield, looking down over the water? And it's a really great place to be. So I can imagine you just getting back and enjoying the view. Yeah, being forced out of your comfort zone. And great stuff has come from it.
Absolutely. Like I had a vision that I would end up podcasting at some point, but I never thought it would happen 2 years ago. And it was COVID that really got me out of my comfort zone. And I wasn't comfortable with it initially. It's nerve wracking, but obviously after 2 years of doing it, it becomes less nervous, and I'm really enjoying it. So, I'm actually grateful for COVID for, stepping me out of my comfort zone. It also got me into webinars, running webinars, because before that I was doing face-to-face seminars, but webinars enables me to, again, broaden my reach. Before it was just geographical people would come and see me. Like if I was giving a talk at the Maroubra Library, then I'd have people in the Maroubra area come and visit me. So, so now I can get, like I remember in COVID when I was doing webinars, I was getting a heap of people from the UK, US. It was incredible. It was really global.
Yeah, and I've noticed that as well, where before it was just local. You could only get that tiny little market. But because we were all forced into lockdown, people are so used to doing stuff through Zoom, so used to doing the online courses, doing online, as you said, meeting people for doctors. You go there and you can do it online. You can do it virtually. So that not only saves the time in traveling from here to there, but you're accessible to people in the UK, people in the US, people in India, people in Asia, all around the world. So as you mentioned, I think there's so many positive stuff to have come from the last 2.5 years. And a lot of that, as you keep going back to, you had to step outside of your comfort zone. And that really forced everybody to do that. And people are still forced to step outside of their comfort zone and really stretch. So what's, say, 3 things that you're really grateful for over the past 2 years? Take away the podcast, and we'll talk about your podcast a little bit later, because I'm a fan. I love listening to it, and you do have some fantastic guests on there. But what's a couple of other things that you're really grateful for that have helped the past couple of years?
Certainly the connection with family. Like, so it was like just being, you're locked in your own house, and you're stuck with your children and your wife. I mean, but we really rallied together and we supported one another, and like we really bunkered down, closed the hatchet, and then really, worked together as a team. And we had a lot of fun together. So we're often reflecting back on that period and saying, oh, wasn't that great? We really enjoyed it. And like we would have theme nights where we would embrace a culture and we'll dress up, and then we would someone would look up about that culture and then put on a presentation about the culture. We'd also eat the food of that culture, and it was a lot of fun. And we actually we were doing that every weekend, and it's something that we thought, well, I mean, there's no reason why we can't do it now, but it was sort of, we probably had a bit more time to do those things. And then the fact that we're exercising together, so it would go out together as a family, would go walking, would ride bikes together, and so that was it was just really, I guess, the family getting together and really bonding closer. So that was probably the biggest thing I was grateful for. In terms of my own health, I was looking to what else I could do to improve that. And I was, I guess, getting outside and exercising more. Before that, I was training in the gym a lot. So it was good to see what I could do in outdoor sort of fitness and just body weight resistance and all that. So it challenged me in terms of my own training. So I really enjoyed that. And then I'd say the third one for me was really just touching base with people. So reaching out, like having the time to reach out and check in to see how others were going and how they were faring and how I could help them out. So I think I had certainly more time to do that and to check in, and we'd have family gatherings on Zoom and stuff like that, and trivia nights and stuff like that. So it was really cool.
I'd going on that last point, I think it's funny that even though we were locked down in our own our little cubby holes, that it really gave us the time and enabled us to reach out. And yes, it may not have been physically touching them, but to reconnect with people, with friends that you may not have spoken to for 2 or 3 years. Just give them a buzz and see how things are going. Like you said, have that family time. Yes, it was forced family time, but it's still fun family time. And that's time that we're never going to get back again. Hopefully hopefully never going to get back again. And with the mental side of things, how do you help people overcome like these tough obstacles, whether it be the last 2 years, or they might have gone through something as losing their job, not due to the great resignation, but just due to life no longer needing them because of the advancement with the work.
Yeah, so I certainly want them to put the event in perspective. And I say events, like I'm not labeling the event. I say it's an event because in life, we will have all sorts of events come into our lives. And what we take away from it is our perspective of it, right? But there's always another side to the perspective that we've taken, and it's the unconscious. Unconscious. We're unconscious of that. We're only conscious of what we can sense. And so what I do with my clients is to help them to see that event as something on the way, not in the way. So it's
Yeah,
on
I
the way
love
to,
that.
to where
Love
they're
it.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to help them see it that it's on the way as opposed to in the way, it's really going to that event and finding that balanced perspective on that event. So they see it objectively. So like, for example, take COVID. During COVID and even now, people will talk about all the bad things. So, I lost my job, I lost my income, I lost this and lost this. And so they're looking at all the negatives.
Yeah.
But we can balance that perspective with what has come into their life as a positive or what has left their life as a positive. So they may have been in a terrible relationship, but what the pandemic did was brought it to a head, and they've left that person that was horrible to them or they didn't like and they wanted to move on from. So it's bringing them to realize that there's two sides to it, and we can perfectly balance that event so it's neutral. We see it objective, and we can see how it served us, as opposed to thinking, oh, it was terrible. It was so drastic. It was, and this is typically how we're wired from the media, is to see the negatives.
Negative. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny that what you were talking about before and this instance and what we've spoken about before as well, where like everyone in the world went through COVID, but yet you've come up with positive after positive after positive. And that's the way I like to look at it as well. You come up with positive and it just becomes that snowball effect and I'm not saying it was all rosy. It was tough. And the first day that the gym closed down for me, I cried. I cried for probably 5 or so minutes, not sobbing, but just what now? And my wife came and we just took some time together. And then another important thing you said is that you guys created that team. And that's what we did as well. We created that team. And same as in business, when you get the teams that are all going towards the same ending, and you really get everyone not jumping on the train and riding, but everyone's there pushing the train in the same direction. But yeah, going back to the first point, was looking for that positive. And it is, I believe, and like I'm sure that you can tell us how you can train that response. So like you said, we're trained by the media to go instantly negative, instantly negative. What have you done to go, instead of instantly negative, flip that and go, where's the positive? What's a little tip?
Yeah, it's actually taking a pause. So when we perceive an event, and again, depending on what the event is, it can really, it's going to turn on our fight, flight, or fight, flight, or freeze response. Yeah, yeah. So, and that's our amygdala, and it's it's wired like that for survival.
Yeah.
But what we can do is take the blood glucose and oxygen to the prefrontal cortex, which is our executive function, is where we have our governance, right? By taking a pause, by taking in some deep breaths. So that really takes us out of that fight, flight, or freeze response and enables us to then reflect on what's just happened, and we can respond accordingly. And for example, just say you're in the workplace and someone gives you feedback that you initially perceived as not so favorable, right?
Yeah.
rather than allow your amygdala to run your emotional response, which could just fuel the fire and then result in this confrontation
There's
and
a bomb going
yeah,
off.
exactly, a big bomb going off, is to actually take a pause and then you can really, I guess, better reflect on what was said, and then see it more objectively. So as we know, the feedback is the breakfast of champions, and through all your sporting career that you've learnt more from when you've lost fights, from when you've lost football games, than what you did from winning premierships or winning fights. And so it's the feedback and how we perceive the feedback and what we take from it enables us to actually better respond. So for me, I think, to answer your question, to go back to it, is to really take that pause and to take some deep breaths, because you'll respond in a much more objective way, and a way that's going to enhance the interaction as opposed to add fuel to the fire, as you said, cause an explosion.
For sure. And that's something that all of the listeners can take in straight away. And I recommend that everyone go and try this. Next time they're having a conversation with someone, and it doesn't even have to be necessarily feedback. It can just be when people are waiting for an answer, just pause for a little bit. And Anthony, you know as well as I know how uncomfortable that's going to feel initially, because people like to fill the silence. But just pause, take a big deep breath, think about it, and then deliver your response. Because I know that I do this as well, and it's a great little tip, and it was at the back there. So thank you very much for bringing that forward. But how creating that pause, you have power in the pause. How when you pause for just that little second, not only does it give you a clearer mind, but people tend to lean forward because they go, oh, he's going to tell us something very thought-provoking.
Absolutely. And I was just thinking about back in your wrestling days, when you get into, you get caught and you think, oh, I'm going to have to tap out of this. But if you pause in that moment, recollect your thoughts, you'll go to the prefrontal cortex and be creative in terms of an escape out of that, out of that grab or grappling or whatever it's called.
Because you saying that, it's taken me back to so often when we're in bad situations, and people that aren't trained and training in pausing in conversation is like training in wrestling in that bad position. If you haven't trained, you're going to panic. You're going to just keep flailing. You're going to waste energy and have to tap out. But if you're trained, you can slow things down. You don't necessarily have to move fast. You just have to protect yourself first and then think of an option to go with. That's brilliant. I really do encourage people to really practice. If anything this week, practice is one thing. When you get feedback from someone, or even just ask a question, take that time, and it creates that muscle of being able to sit in the silence, sit in that uncomfortable region, and sound more intelligent and be more intelligent as well, because you've given yourself time to think about it.
Absolutely, David. And just adding to that, it's the same as when we realize that someone's not themselves. Like we're trained, or we've been told to say, "Are you okay?" And often that person will respond with that sort of, everything's
good,
fine.
Yeah, good,
Well, you
mate.
should be
Thanks.
right. Yeah, all good, all good. But how it relates to, I guess, having that pause and taking that moment is actually allowing that person the space. And so when they start speaking, is not thinking that you got to have the solutions and give them the answer to their problems, is to actually just to hold the space for them and allow them to speak and allow them to continue to speak. The moment we interject and sort of throw something at, they close up. But if we sort of nod our heads and encourage further conversation without interjecting, they're thinking, well, this person's really listening. They really want to hear what I have to say. And so they continue to talk. And so, like, I can see you now, David, you're nodding your head. You're encouraging me to keep talking. And so, and this is exactly how we have the conversation in the workplace, is actually allowing the space. And I think the important thing about the space is not like if you're rushing down the corridor and you've got to get to a meeting, don't ask if that person's okay then.
Mm,
You've got to have the time to hear them out. So you've actually got to make sure that you don't want to be rushing and having a deadline and having to hurry that conversation. You actually want to have the time so
yeah.
that you can give them the space to share what's really going on. And you don't have to have the answers or solutions. They just want to be
Mm.
heard. And together as a team, or, you can discuss other people that could come in to help them out or whatever. But it really is that just being able to hear out the problem is the important thing.
Oh, 100%. And like you said, it's not just not being in a rush, but also being present. Like, because you no doubt see it, because I know I've seen it when I've gone into companies and you talk to them or you're doing work with them and you see a manager rush past and they say something, and you can say whatever you like. I like to throw in random just words to see if people are paying attention. And because so often, like it happens, we just go on automatic pilot. And that goes right back to what you said at the beginning of the podcast, where companies that have that culture of the employees having a voice, but it not just having a voice, but it being heard as well. That can make all the difference in the world.
Absolutely, David.
Mm.
It's so important, and it's probably the biggest tip that I give for mental mental health first aid
Yeah.
is having the space and allowing the time. Because
Mm.
too often people are in a rush and they may ignite something, but then that person will think, oh, they're too busy for them to hear me out, and so they won't actually share. And so that person will then perceive that person they've just asked is okay, but it's not the
Yeah.
case. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
100%. And especially over the last 2 years when people are feeling the strain. I know well, we're both from Sydney. In Sydney and in Australia, we really got away from it quite light. So a lot of other companies that I've spoken to, and that's one of the things that's really opened the lines to be able to have this Zoom. So if you have a Zoom with someone, it can just be like it's just you and I. We do have that time. We do have that connection. And being able to have that, but face to face is better, but being able to be consciously with them, not around and not, because
Yeah.
like you said, if you ask the question and you nick off, that you don't know what's going on. You might have flicked the match on some petrol and that person could end up seething and it just end up bad.
Absolutely, and that they could potentially take away that person doesn't really care about me.
Mm. Which
Yeah,
is not good for a company culture
no,
at all.
yeah, absolutely,
And
absolutely.
and as we start to wind up, because I'm just like I could just keep talking and talking and talking with you about all this sort of stuff. And you know that we can as well. We've done it before. What would you like to tell with the knowledge that you've got now? What would you like to tell a 15-year-old Anthony?
15-year-old Anthony, yeah, follow your heart. Really
Mm.
engage, yeah, engage your heart, connect with your heart, and follow and pursue what your heart is telling you. So, I think as a kid, we certainly know what we love, and to
Yeah,
do it,
yeah.
to embrace it, and not to listen to the outside influences of the world. Just really have belief in yourself, and know that you've got the fire within you, and to really fuel that fire by taking the necessary steps. And they could be small steps initially, but that
Mm.
will build momentum. And as you know what it is like, when momentum builds, it snowballs and
Yeah.
snowballs and becomes much.
Becomes
Yeah,
unstoppable.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
And one thing that you said there as well is like kids, I love talking to my daughter and I know that you love talking to your kids because we bumped into you a couple of weeks ago. And it was just the dreams that they have, keeping that dream alive. Why, as adults, should we not still have these massive dreams and massive goals to aim for? And I think it's because so many people do, and it's not necessarily a big fire hose that's putting it out. It's all of these people with just a cup of water, a cup of water. Whereas if you can somehow block that out from whether it's from the child, we can't do anything from our past, but we can certainly do it from now. If people are throwing water at you, either put an umbrella up or move somewhere where you're there with people that have those big, massive goals and strive for it together.
100%. Totally agree, David.
And Anthony, you have your own podcast, which everyone here listening, I was a guest on last week, and it was a lot of fun. So, Anthony, whereabouts can they find you, your podcast? Whereabouts can they connect with you? And yeah, just tell us more about how they can get in contact with you.
Yeah, I think the best portal is my website, because the website has my webinars, has my podcast on it. So go to meandmywellness.com.au. So yeah, and you'll also find connections with all my social media. So all the connections to all my platforms that I'm on is via my website. Have my email address there, phone number. So yeah, visit my website.
Yeah, so just one-stop shop.
Yeah.
Everyone go and visit meandmywellness.com.au. And Anthony, I just want to thank you so much for being a fantastic guest and giving us those couple of takeaways are worth it. They're worth to go out and practice, and they'll see the results in no time. So Anthony, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate you having me on your podcast. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for listening to the Dynamic Company Culture Spotlight podcast. If you're a successful Chief Operations Officer, Human Resource Manager, or someone that runs a successful business that also has a great company culture, and you believe that you have a story to share with the wider community and would like to be a guest on a future podcast, please visit the link below. Or if you can think of anyone who you know would be a brilliant guest on this podcast, tag them in. And as always, feel free to share this far and wide. The further we can get this podcast, the more impact we can have. So don't forget to share this on all social media platforms and help others along the way. Don't forget to tag the DCCS podcast, as I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. As we post regularly, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss episodes that will possibly help your business ramp up to a whole nother level. Your ratings and reviews go a long way to helping us get recognized and to promote the show. And they mean a lot to my team and I. If you want to know more, go to our website, www.phenomleap.com.au, or follow me on LinkedIn and feel free to message me there. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to giving you more tips on next week's episode.